Lindsay Tam Holland was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, and actually convinced someone once that every student there rode dolphins to school. After moving to Northern California and earning an undergraduate degree from Stanford, Holland went on to earn an MFA in creative writing from the University of San Francisco. Along with teaching high school English and creative writing, Holland coaches water polo. Anybody? We have some players here. Avoids tofu and enjoys writing limericks. Her debut novel, The Counterfeit Family Tree of V. Crawford-Wong, is forthcoming next month from Simon Schuster, and is available for advanced order online. Please welcome Lindsay Tam Holland.
Thank you so much. It's a little bit of an awkward bio because I think it's trying to hide my gender and ethnicity, and clearly, if I'm reading, that's really not going to fly very long. But that's from the book jacket. So I want to thank Carrie and Jean for inviting me. I'm very excited, a little bit nervous. I'm used to talking to high school students and to 3-year-olds, so adults is a little nerve-wracking. Adults and other writers. All right. Being here is a satisfying reminder that sort of the literary hub of the Bay Area does not begin and end in the fog. That we have this rich environment down here. I just to follow up with the rest of that bio. I just got this in the mail yesterday, which I'm pretty excited about. And I've already started to write on it. Be like, I don't like that. I want to change that. So I've never been published before, so this is kind of a new experience. My book launch party is going to be at Kepler's on July 23rd. You are all welcome and invited. I would love to see you. We'll have some bubbly. We'll have some books. It's Kepler's, which is nice, and nearby, and hopefully not in a heat wave. No, I guess I'm not in control of everything. So I'm going to read from sort of 3/4 of the way into the book. Things you need to know is my main character's name is V. He's half Chinese, half Texan, white. And his parents are both estranged from their families, and that's sort of the heart of the tension of the novel. He and his very nerdy Chinese best friend Madison have forged a letter pretending to be from his grandparents in China in order to get them to China. Madison, for many reasons, missed out on a trip to visit her family, and V wants to find his family. I guess the only other thing you need to know is when he mentions Adele, she is a basketball player that he liked. All right. I needed to tell Dad the truth about the letter, even if that meant we never got to China. I bit my nails and developed nervous habits like tapping my foot and rubbing my chin so often that a bunch of zits broke out on it. But I couldn't kill Dad's family right in front of him. I kept them alive one day at a time. I kept my mouth shut and let all my mistakes swirl around me, and we rushed towards March 26th. My stomach stayed in a tight fist beneath my lungs. I couldn't breathe, and because I couldn't breathe, I certainly couldn't talk. My life was 1 part adrenaline and 2 parts imminent train wreck. Packing was a nightmare. Mom wanted to take a first aid kit the size of a small animal. There are drugstores, Dad said, and hospitals. Please, Pam. You haven't been there for decades, Mom said. Do you watch the news? There's a pandemic flu breaking out there every few weeks, it seems. I actually enjoyed sitting back and watching, except I was afraid that one of them would take it too far and declare that they weren't going or that we all weren't going. One night, over a dinner of leftovers that Dad called anything you like, which was only true in this case if you liked leftover meatloaf or leftover fried rice, we came close to calling the whole thing off. Dad was talking about staying off the beaten path. What's wrong with a little modernity, Kenny? Mom asked. Hot water, reliable electricity? Mom was not an adventuresome traveler. She wasn't a traveler at all. Her idea of a wild vacation was a dinner out in San Francisco, maybe a play, maybe even spending the night in some cheesy tourist hotel near Fisherman's Wharf, where the rooms always smelled a little like clam chowder. "We're in search of an authentic cultural experience," Dad said. "We can't get that at a Best Western." "What about staying with my grandparents?" I asked. I enjoyed playing my clueless card. I mean, we could stay in Dad's old room. They were both looking at me now. I mean, they did invite us, right? Shut up now, I told myself. I mean, if they came here, they'd stay with us, right? Mom put down her fork. "That, honey, is a wonderful idea. We invite them here. Problem solved. We'll pay for their tickets, everything. Think about the medical care they could get here. Your father, Kenny, he could go to a real doctor, not one of those ones who just prescribe herbs and things. That could make all the difference." "Oh, God, no." "That's not a bad idea," Dad said. "Wait," I said. "No." "Why not?" Dad asked. I shoved a huge bite of meatloaf in my mouth, on top of the eggy fried rice that was already in there, just to give myself a second to think. I couldn't breathe and had to chew with my mouth open, and half the meatloaf bite came tumbling out again, fortunately on my plate. "V," Mom said. I nodded. I tried to say sorry, but it came out gurgly and incoherent. They were both looking at me, so I covered my mouth with my hand until I was done chewing. "Sorry," I said again. "Seriously." "That's disgusting," Dad said. "I know," I said. "Sorry." Neither of them were eating, like I'd just completely ruined the dinner experience. "I want to go to China," I finally said. "To visit your grandparents?" Dad said. "Yeah." With my fork, I dissected a piece of spinach that was on my plate. The stem, the watery, bruisable leaf. But I'd kind of like to see them at their place, in their setting. I impaled the leaf bits on my fork, like a diorama. "They're real people, V, not something in a museum," Dad said. "Of course, but I just don't know anything about their lives, not just them, but what's around them and things like, I don't know, the smell of their house, their street, where they eat lunch. I want to know those things. I want to be there." I looked at Dad for a long moment. "Please." He picked up his beer bottle and peered through it, then took a long time bringing it to his lips for a sip. "We do have Madison to think about," he said finally. "We have promised her a trip to her family. It would be cruel for her to lose this opportunity twice in a row." I nodded. "Okay," Dad said. And then they went back to arguing about where to stay, and I wisely kept my stupid mouth shut. "You saved my ass," I told Madison on the way to history class the next morning. "Of course," she said. "What did I do this time?" I gave her the abbreviated version of our dinner conversation, and she slapped me on the arm. "You're so dumb. Stop trying to show how innocent you are. You're a horrible liar, and you'll just blow it." "You're right," I said, "of course." I pulled the classroom door open and gestured for her to go in, and the three girls behind us thought I was also holding it for them. "It shows," I said over their heads once I'd gotten through the door myself, "that we're really just going for you. Dad doesn't care about China, and he doesn't care that I care." "So I shouldn't feel guilty for all this?" Madison asked. "Shh," I said. Her eyes got wide, and she looked around the classroom quickly. "Oh my God, what?" "Everyone thinks you're perfect," I whispered dramatically. "Don't blow your cover." She slapped me again, harder this time. "I feel guilty all the time, V. I don't even know if I can go." "You can. We are." "I didn't think this would actually work. Your parents will hate me forever. We won't be able to be friends anymore." "Listen," I said, "I take the fall for this. When, or if, Dad figures it out, it's all on me, Scout's honor." My chest puffed out with pride at being so chivalrous. I could tell she was thinking, and that she had a lot of questions, and that she didn't quite believe me. "As if you were ever a Boy Scout," she finally said. "It comes down to picking a side," I said. "You're in or you're out. Either we tell my parents the truth, or we see it through." She sat down in her seat and got out her pink pencil case and lined it up neatly at the top of her desk. "And if we tell the truth, you're never going to China. You know that," I said. "At least not until I don't need my parents for anything anymore." "Even then," I said, "your parents have cornered the Asian guilt market. You'll probably never go." "Never, ever, ever." "Okay," she said. "Ever." "Shut up already." I opened my mouth like I was going to cough up another ever, and she raised her hand like she was going to hit me again. I smiled. She sighed. "We'll be horrible people together," I said. And I'm going to skip ahead to their first morning in China. The morning was so dark and cold that it didn't feel like morning. Dad said, "We must adjust ourselves to this time," and turned on the light. As if on cue, the shower started singing next door, and I wondered if Mom and Dad had completely synchronized their watches. "Up, up," Dad said. During the night, I'd cocooned myself in blankets, ripping them out of their neat tucks and burrowing into them to stay warm. The room snapped with morning cold. Apparently, the word heated in Chinese roughly translated to the perfect temperature to see your breath in the air. I dreaded unwrapping myself to change into clean, cold clothes. Shower, Dad said. I sat up and the flickering antique lamp threw my shadow against the opposite wall. The walls were thin, and I could hear the shower next door. The water didn't patter down in a steady stream, but splashed intermittently in heavier cascades, like it had collected in someone's hair or a washcloth and then been wrung out over the echoing tiles. Maybe Mom was showering just on the other side of the wall. It made me uncomfortable. Mom was Mom. She wasn't supposed to have a naked body. Thinking of her naked made my stomach flop the way it did when I thought of her parents screaming, maybe even hitting her. I wanted to go back to seeing her as this goofy, happy lady who just happened to be my mom. Not as someone so fragile, who I had no choice but to love and want to protect. I flopped back down on the bed and covered my head with a thin pillow. But maybe it was Madison in there. Thinking about Madison naked didn't make me feel any better. It made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Madison was supposed to be a buddy, a brain on a popsicle stick. She was not fragile, and she did not need protecting. I took a deep breath. Madison was just Madison. She hadn't changed overnight just because she'd been sleeping 10 feet away. Still, as I tiptoed along the frigid tiles to the tiny bathroom, and as I stood under the scalding water that squirted out of a bulbous, detachable showerhead, I wondered if Madison ever thought about me naked. I felt flushed and embarrassed. The shower suddenly didn't feel safe or private, as if thinking of Madison had conjured her up, as if she were perched on the toilet, which was a normal toilet, not a hole in the ground like I'd feared, and daring me to use the soap that smelled like a flower basket. I shook my head to make her go away. I closed my eyes and imagined Adele under the spray with me. But in my fantasy, Adele was interested in Madison, and the two of them wanted me to get out of the shower altogether. But then Adele got needy, and Madison got brainy and sarcastic, and I realized I couldn't imagine a lesbian shower scene with two girls who had no respect for each other. So I stood solo under the spray and scrubbed with the perfume soap and tried to wake up. When I emerged from the bathroom, Dad was dressed and waiting for me. Should I wear jeans, I asked. I only brought jeans. The symbol of America, he said, which was not exactly an answer. My jeans were wrinkled, and despite the shower, my hair stood up in strange, pillow-influenced waves. But overall, I felt clean and warm, and I started thinking, I could do this thing. China. I could survive it. Enjoy it, even. I felt like giving Dad a bear hug, but he was counting his money, laying it out in neat piles on the dresser, so I left him alone. We crossed the courtyard and met up with Mom and Madison in a thick-walled room that smelled like greasy donuts. The tables were plastic and plastered with scratched Pepsi logos, and the other guests, an old couple and a set of parents with young kids, all Chinese of course, nodded and bowed to us with wide, genuine smiles on their faces. How are you feeling? I asked Mom. Oh, don't worry about me, she said. Isn't this an adorable little tea room? Adorable, I said. That wasn't the right word for the chaos and strangeness of everything, but I wanted to agree with Mom, so I left it at that. The manager, the same one from the night before, his band uniform as crisp as ever, and he's not actually wearing a band uniform. He just thinks that it looks like one. Just clarifying, it's not some weird band trip. All right. He served us breakfast, bitter tea, soupy congee, fried breadsticks, and a big black egg cut in half and sliding around on a thin white plate. It looked like a diseased eyeball. Madison sniffed cautiously at hers, and it made me feel better that she didn't just dig in like she ate these all the time. Dad laughed. Eggs, sunny side up, he said. I ate a doughy breadstick which was oily and tasteless, and I poked reluctantly at my rotten, jellied eyeball. Breakfast didn't make sense. Eggs weren't yellow and salty and yolky. They looked like swollen, naked eyeballs and smelled like stinky cheese. My sense of adventure was diminishing along with my appetite. I wanted to crawl back into bed and wake up in Liverton. Liverton is where the novel is mostly set. Livermore, Pleasanton. I didn't want a real place, but close enough. And my editor on the East Coast didn't know what I was doing. All right. Eat up, Dad said. Who knows what can happen before lunch? He always said things like that, and I never took them seriously before, but today he could be right. Today we'd be with Madison's family by lunchtime. Would they expect us to be brave eaters? I picked up my chopsticks and stuck them in the rubbery brown jelly around the eyeball. I touched the tip of the chopsticks to the tip of my tongue. Nothing. Madison copied me. I picked up a pile of the shredded ginger and carved off a section of the bruise-colored yolk. The ginger burned my nose, and I didn't taste a thing. Delicious, I said. I'm not going there, Madison said. You're there, I said. You're here. And taking all day, Dad said. I give up, I said. You can't give up, Madison said. It's too late for that. I glared at her. She wasn't just talking about breakfast. What right did she have to bully me? Back off, I said, and I took the rest of the egg and shoved it in my mouth. I wanted to gag, I did gag, at the creamy sweetness of it. I'd expected it to taste like rotten ass, but it was rich and soft and had a burning aftertaste. I fought down the urge to puke it up all over the table. I drained the entire pot of tea and then had to leave the table for fear that thinking about the egg floating in my belly would bring it up again. We packed and got ready to leave, but Mom wasn't feeling well again, and we decided to catch a later bus. The idea of Mom puking her way through the 3-hour trip to the mountains made me feel sad and queasy too, so I was perfectly content to sit in the courtyard and wait. The sun was dusty but warm because there was no wind. Is she going to be okay? I asked Dad. It's just the food, Dad said. She's not used to the flavor. We're not used to it either. I shuddered at the memory of the century egg. It's in your DNA to accept it, he said. It takes thousands of years to make DNA that loves things like Kung Pao chicken. I knew he was making a joke, but I didn't feel like letting go of the subject. But if you go back far enough, we all ate the same things, I argued. You know, grubs and berries, woolly mammoth steaks, giant panda kebabs. V, Madison said. Your mother, Dad said, she is most happy when she has a routine she knows. You know, she's never been this far away from home. I wanted to mention that I hadn't either, but I didn't want to make it a contest. Mom was tired and woozy, and aside from my breakfast antics, I was just fine. Was it really the Chinese half of me that could handle all this? That felt adventuresome and alive? It seemed like it was more than Mom's DNA that made her sick. It had to be bacteria or her dislike of change or both, and her parents didn't love her. Wasn't that enough to make anyone scared and sick for all of eternity? The courtyard was drowsily comfortable, and we sat in silence and listened to the noises of the street outside and the chirping birds. The chirping came from the bamboo cages, and I moseyed over and found 2 birds where yesterday there had been none. They were talking to each other, warbling and twittering and bobbing their heads back and forth. They appeared out of nowhere, I said. It's a miracle. Madison stuck her face near one of the cages and made cooing baby noises. It's more miracle than you think, Dad said. He stroked the bamboo bars, and the birds hopped over and tried to peck at his fingers. He laughed and clucked at them, and then his smile slowly faded. Since we tried to destroy all the sparrows, he said. I looked at him, surprised. Was this part of an ancient Chinese fable? A disturbing family secret? A clue to the buried past? Dad watched the sky. I will tell you a story. It started the year I was born. Mao began something called the Kill a Sparrow campaign. We would all go in the fields and hills and bang pots, so the sparrows could not land and instead fell dead from the sky. A rain of dead sparrows, and this was something we celebrated. Why would someone do that? Madison asked. Not someone, everyone. They ate the grain that was for the people. Don't birds eat bugs? I asked. I'm pretty sure they do. It didn't make sense. Dad was losing his mind, making up stories, mixing myth and fact and fiction. His English was starting to sound choppy too, like he was thinking in Chinese and translating poorly as he went along. If he came totally unhinged, if he began speaking in gibberish, it would be my fault. I'd brought him back here to his difficult memories. They do mostly, he said, eat bugs. Mao was wrong, his science more from old women's stories than real observation. The campaign ended before I was 4, but still, it makes my first memory. Banging a pot and spoon and walking up and down the fields. It filled me with such purpose, such joy. It was the wrong thing to do, but how could we know this? We were told what was, and we believed it, because we had to, and because we were hungry. The bird pecked at his finger again, but he didn't laugh this time. I watched the bird's beak strike the pad of his first finger, denting and reddening it without breaking through the skin. All those sparrows dead, he said. And for what? One person's guess at how to make the world better? A guess on top of other guesses that led to famine and millions of people dead? This is what we come from, V, Dad said, looking at me. There's no pride in it and no escape from it for me, even if we live an ocean away. Do you understand? I didn't entirely, but I nodded. My throat felt swollen, and I clenched my jaw against the pain. Then this is good, he said. This is the good that comes from that shame. I want you to make good memories of this trip, and not just hear my bad stories. They're not bad, I said quickly. You were only 4, Madison said. It wasn't your fault. There should not be shame in what you cannot change, but agreeing here, he tapped his head, and here, he tapped his heart, is trouble. I could forgive my ancestors for being trapped in a cruel time, but could I forgive myself for my own mistakes? Could my dad? I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's one bad cat, Harry.